Then Wallace and Darwin independently came up with this theory. Now, Darwin's famous book on the origin of species by means of natural selection was published. There is one more modification. The idea that new species are modified descendants of the older or ancestral ones is called as descent with modification theory. Uh, it is argued among people that all species are descended from one or few original types. So now we are going towards defining evolution. So evolutionary changes are heritable changes which can be transmitted to the offsprings. And evolution basically means a huge change in a population through successive generations. When some favorable traits get transmitted, that is called a successive generation only, and then the trait or the population get evolved. Now, what is trait variation? So this is a broad term. uh, there are two types, that is continuous trait variation or categorical trait variation. Now continuous variations are like height, weight or something. uh, Let me draw a graph for this. Like if this is continuous variation, then this graph can be like this. But if it is a categorical, then the graph will be like this. So like tall or short, that is categorical. Then flower color in plant species, that has only red, white or pink, that also can be categorical. uh, when variation in particular trait is categorical, we can call them as trait variants. Now this is the selection by the environment. So there can be biotic and abiotic components. Like the previous example we have given, that a black background and a bird is eating bugs, there the biotic environmental pressure was the bird and the abiotic environmental pressure was the black background. Just go back to the video and check it. So in that example, the selection for what the selection was for insect color, right? You just go back to the example and verify the that is a important thing. Individuals do not evolve, their population evolves. You have to remember that. This is a mostly mm, misconception, so you have to remember this. But we can also say that traits or phenotypes evolve, but we cannot say individual evolve, because individuals cannot evolve, because for evolution you need uh, the succession of a trait, and for this you need reproduction. And like if one individual, there is no chance of variation. In a particular island there are palm tree species. Taller trees are most likely to die due to wind damage, and what we see after several generations, that shorter tree height are favored, and the proportion of short trees has increased, leading to a change in average tree height of the population. So what we say, has one tree evolved? That is a misconception. One tree cannot evolve, and also trees are not also evolved. The evolution happened in the trait, the average tree height of the population, that is evolved. Now traits that are also phenotypes that are determined by one or more genes. An allele is a variant of gene. These are just fundamental things. Then allele frequency, this is an important thing in evolution. The number of copies of an allele, total number of copies of an allele if we divide these, we get allele frequency. And the phenotype frequency is just similar, the proportion of individuals in a population with phenotype or trait variant. And there is a variation given. uh, because of variation in these two parts, these BL and BR are called allele of the same genes. So now we are taking an example to understand the whole evolution thing. That is a hypothetical haploid insect species. There are two color morphs determined as alleles. Uh, the allele that causes black is marked as BL, and the brown causing allele is marked as BR. So there is a population. The habitat is dominated by brown that matches the color of the BR allele phenotype. So if a predator is there, he will hardly see the brown ones. He will mostly see the black ones because the background is brown. So let's say the frequency of BR was previously like this and the frequency of BL is like this. Then through time, the frequency of the brown ones should increase because of both biotic and abiotic selection pressures. But if there is only abiotic, I mean if there is only background and no hunter, nothing would happen. If there is no fecundity difference, I will come later to fecundity. Now we can draw a graph. Let's check this. So now we can plot a graph for this. So now we say it was the frequency of the brown ones, and this is the black ones. This is suppose BL, and this is suppose BR. So through time, the frequency of BR will increase till 1, almost 1, and this will come to almost 0. Here is one important thing. Can this thing go beyond 0? No, this cannot go beyond 0 until there is another same variation happens. Then only it can go, otherwise not. Let's mark this as 1. Now let's take another example. In there is a flower population. We are calculating the allele frequency and gene allele frequency of both alleles and the phenotype frequency of both phenotypes. You can do this by pausing the video. So try to do this. So if the pollinators prefer blue, what do you expect will happen to the flower color and allele frequencies? So the blue is the recessive one. If they prefer only blue, the frequency of this R will increase, and the frequency of this will increase, and this will decrease because the total should be 1. So one increases, another should decrease. Now we define evolution in a different type. Its second definition of evolution. So evolution can be defined as change in frequency of alleles within a gene pool from one generation to the next. Now the definition of gene pool. Gene pool is the total collection of genes in a population at any point of time. Notice here the point of time is very important because gene pool is some point of time the gene pool keeps fluctuating. So in this point of time the collection of genes is different, this point of time the collection of genes is different. Now when the allele frequencies for a gene change, like for if R increases and R decreases, there will be most recessive phenotypes we will see. Therefore, the previous definition of evolution, change in inherited traits of populations, is more perfect. It's compatible with the one based on the allele frequencies, but the allele frequency not is always for practical things what we see with our eyes. We have to do too much experiments. Now, a change in population size is not necessary component for evolution. So, take one thing. There is a population size PS, and there is allele frequency defined as AF. So, if DAF equal to 0, I mean, when the change in allele frequency is 0, then no matter population size increases or not, there is no evolution. But let's say change in population size not equal to 0, and allele frequency, change in allele frequency also not equal to 0, then it's surely an evolution. Okay. Now take another aspect. Say population size does not change, but allele frequency changes. Then it is also a evolution. You can read these things. I have mentioned all these in this talk. Now there is an insect species. There are two morphs, small and large. Now we will come to fecundity. So the on an average, the morph that has higher fecundity is the large ones. Fecundity is defined as total number of offspring an individual can create. So if both morphs survive equally well, it is expected that the larger morph will become more frequent in the population, because the large one has higher fecundity. It will create, suppose, too many offsprings. But when comes to smaller one, suppose it creates only two offsprings, and they don't mate with the larger ones, hardly mate with the larger ones, so their frequency is decreased, this frequency is increased. Thus, it trait may evolve through selection even without differences in survival. Now let's come to fitness, this which is related to fecundity and survival. So we have to know one graph for this. So suppose this is uh, the reproductive age. So before reproductive age, survival is mostly dependent on, I mean, fitness is mostly dependent on fecundity. Survival is less important. But after this, for population, survival is more important than fecundity. So we can say that before a reproductive age, we can say that suppose fecundity to the power 4 plus survival, and after reproductive age we can say f square plus s square, we can say this. Now there is a paradox we can discuss about. So consider an individual with a an individual named A with small, frail and diseased. Now it produces an offspring before death, and the offspring goes on to reproduce. And there is another individual which is B, strong, large, free from disease but do not reproduce. So we say that A has higher fitness. The small, frail and diseased individual which can reproduce one offspring has higher fitness than the one with strong, large, free from disease body but cannot reproduce. So this is fitness paradox. Now, a trait or a trait variant can enhance fitness by improving survival, or there is another way, increasing fecundity. So, even if you don't survive, if you can reproduce too much offsprings before during your reproductive age, then you are more fit than the one uh, who is a strong, large but cannot reproduce. Now, when we come to natural selection, it favors traits, phenotypes, trait variants that have higher fitness. Similarly, selection favors alleles genotypes that have higher fitness. There is an evidence for evolution, which is Darwin's finches. So, if we take the data, we will see that during droughts in Galapagos Islands, there is higher proportion of larger seeds, and during rainy days, higher proportion of smaller seeds prevail. Higher proportion of smaller seeds prevail. So, and also this supports the data that during droughts, as there are larger seeds, the beaks of the finch is found to be larger, and during rainy days, to its smaller seeds, the beaks of the finches are found to be pointed. I mean, very thin to carry small seeds or eat small seeds. So this supports the theory of evolution, and this is the trend line for that. This is the mean peak depth of the parents and the offsprings. So this is almost the same, which uh, depicts the graph that x equal to y. This is the trend line. This is the graph what I said about. During dry years, the peak depth keeps increasing and then decrease when it's rainy season. So why it decreases? That is also a topic of thinking. Like with bigger beaks, it can also eat small seeds. So why does it decrease during this time? It should not decrease now. But there is one concept that it is very hard to handle small seeds with bigger beaks, and also bigger beaks are heavy, so they burn more calories to fly and to grow those beaks. So this is not that much favored. So there is also the same thing, that the development of pesticide resistance genes in insects. When we use too much pesticides through a long time, uh, the survivors of that pesticide just reproduce, and then the population of the resistant insects increase. This is depicted here. You can pause and understand. You can read about these from online resources. These, so there is evidence for evolution from some fossils. Like many fossils link early extinct species with species living today. Mm, these you can just see for your concern. Now there are prerequisites of now there are prerequisites of evolution by natural selection. The first one is variation in traits. A variation in traits acts on the existing variation. Like mice cannot be directly selected to have larger wings, but can be selected to have longer teeth. But if suddenly a mutation happens and population gets some wings, then it has a chance to increase through natural selection, because wings are favored in the second prerequisite is heritability. Unless a trait is heritable, natural selection cannot act on it. Third prerequisite is difference in fitness. If there is no difference in fitness, no selection can select a trait. Now, many people think that natural selection acts on a, I mean, to give. Many people think that natural selection tries to increase a single trait, but that is not the thing. Natural selection never tries to increase the frequency of a trait. So, natural selection has no goal, no predefined endpoint, no race for perfection. Organisms do not purposefully acquire traits, they just have that event randomly. Natural selection does not act on benefit of a species or provide what it needs. You have to remember that. So now, from now, you should not have misconception about that. Now come to artificial selection. Artificial selection is induced by a man when someone selects for something like these examples. Someone selects for larger foods. Uh, some select a dog for longer legs and floppy ears, then breed them. These are just artificial selections. So there are some questions you can try to answer these on your own, and I will upload the answers in the description. Now, what are the sources of heritable variation? Mutations are the main sources. Like a nucleotide is lost, which is called deletion. A nucleotide is added, insertion, or a nucleotide is replaced, that, or a nucleotide is replaced with another, that is called substitution. Mutations always create some new alleles, which increase in frequency later. Now, mutation can be three types: beneficial, detrimental, or neutral. Beneficial traits are supposed to be increased more because they give more fitness. There are other sources of variation like gene flow, recombination, or genetic duplication. Gene flow is defined as immigration and emigration. Like there is a population P1, there is nothing, or you can say population P2. So if some individual come from there to here, we can call that emigration from here, immigration to this population. Emigration is from and immigration is to. You have to remember that. Don't confuse. Now recombination, you know that that is the basic thing happens in meiosis. Gene duplication, suppose there is a duplicate gene for a certain gene, and one copy undergoes mutation without affecting the other copy. That is also a source of variation. And variation is always random. There is no tendency for it to arise in the direction of improved adaptation. Variation knows nothing, it has no intelligence. Variation just happens randomly. And which individuals have positive variation like that, which helps them to survive, just they reproduce and increase it in population. And the which one that are not fit, they just could not reproduce and decrease in population. Natural selection just imposes direction on evolution. And now there is most important thing, that is genetic drift. So traits can evolve without natural selection through chance. This is called genetic drift. Like there is one population, suddenly there is a decrease in allele frequency. We don't know how. Some populations, some individuals die or just leave the place, and the rest of them create a new population. That is called genetic drift. That is a huge change in allele frequency of population due to chance events. There is no intentional thing, there is only chance event. There is bottleneck effect and founder effect. First we will see founder effect. So there is a population which is still existing. Okay, then a small part of the population travels to another place, and there they found a small population on their own, and which increases along time, but this part is still existing and this part is here existing. So this is founder effect. Now what is bottleneck effect? People confuse between these two. So about bottleneck effect, you have this population. Now you have this part is totally dead, this part is here. Okay, this part is here, but they don't travel anywhere, they stay there. Okay, now as they stay there, suppose that was like this, they are here and they just increase them over time. Okay, so there is no traveling happens, but these part gets dead and the smaller part keeps reproducing and makes a bigger population.